I have deliberately selected the title of the subject as Nani Palkiwala, God's Gift to India. This was the title which was given by Mr. Raj Gopalchari, the Governor General of India, who had named Palkiwala as God's gift. While talking about Palkiwala, I consider myself singularly lucky for some reasons. Number one, Nani was my honorary professor in Government Law College. He used to deliver one lecture per term for the entire college, and I have heard most of his lectures during my college tenure of 1968 to 1971. I had also the good fortune of seeing Nani Palkiwala argue in Bombay High Court. In those days, Nani used to appear very frequently in the High Court, and that is after I started practice in 1971. And I cannot forget his sterling performance in the NP Nathwani versus Police Commissioner of Police's case, particularly during emergency. Thirdly, I was most lucky to listen to Palkiwala on the seventh day of his argument in Keshwananda Bharti case in the Supreme Court, just up to the lunch period. The impression that one gets while watching that particular matter was that here was a conductor who was conducting an orchestra with 13 people playing different instruments. Or you can say that he was a professor who was teaching 13 students who were sitting there completely quiet throughout the session. I was also fortunate to brief him in one of the matters in early 1970s regarding owners of the properties in cantonment area. The matter was supposed to reach the next day. We had a conference with Ashok Desai as his junior counsel at 9 o'clock in his chamber at High Court Annex. Next day, he was supposed to appear. For reasons, unfortunately for our client, the matter did not reach on that day, and we missed out on him. But I had the conference. In the conference, we had sent the brief running into around 300 pages. By the time we came for the conference, he had completely seen the brief. The conference was only for 15 or 20 minutes. He asked a few questions on law to Ashok Desai, and he was ready. Unfortunately, he could not appear the next day. We had to brief Jethmalani, who ultimately argued the matter. Other thing is that being his ardent fan, I had not missed a single of his budget lectures, either at East End Lawns or at the Brabant Stadium. So with this kind of adoration that I have, let us see now what was this great man's humble beginnings were. Nani's name was Nana Boy Ardeshir Palkiwala. He was born on 16th of January 1920. Then this happens to be his birth centenary year. His parents were Sherbanu and Ardeshir. He had an older sister Amy and a younger brother Behram, who was also in the profession. These are the photograph of his parents. His father was in a business of constructing palkis, that is palanquins in those days, and that is how the surname is derived from. And with the advent of motor business, ultimately the palanquin business shut down. He came from a very humble middle class family. He studied at Proprietary High School, Master's Tutorial High School, and he had a hobby of reading books. To save money for buying books and pay his tuition fees, he used to shell chanas, gave tuitions to junior students, played violin at Parsi weddings. So this was his humble beginning. As he grew up, his appetite for philosophy, books on philosophy, art, history, literature, science, and other similar subjects grew. And his favorite authors were Macaulay, Emerson, Gardiner, Chesterton, Johnson, Shakespeare, and Dickens. Nani inculcated some of his father's traits such as perfectionism, humanness, empathy, compassion, and kindness. And that was there all throughout his life. Nani had to overcome some difficulties like a stutter and a writer's camp. He decided to overcome the stutter by participating at the age of 11 in an elocution competition. And the subject was try and try until you succeed. And I'm sure he not only succeeded in that particular competition, but also all throughout his life by trying and trying. He won special mention for that effort. Because of his writer's cramp, he had to have a writer for his LLB as well as the examination, advocate's exam for original side, and his writer was Nargesh Malbar. Eventually, he married Nargesh, and that is the picture that you have, and some of his grandchildren. Nani did not have his own children. Nani started practice in the chamber of Sir Jamshedji Kanga, a very leading advocate at that time. For a time being, he was also the Advocate General of Bombay. The Kanga chamber also was crowded with senior advocates like Sirvai, Marzaban Mistri, R.J. Kola, Karsheji Baba, and others. Nani could hardly get one stable space with one chair. But Nani's progress was such that eventually the client that he attracted, he could not entertain in that one chair. So he had to go and sit in his own car to entertain clients by having conferences. Now it is normally the senior whose chamber you normally go to, his kind of practice you start developing. Sir Jamshedji Kanga had a lot of practice on taxation law. So Nani started assisting him in finding case law. Nani started even drafting some of his opinions that were sought by various corporates. And there was a time when Jamshedji Kanga found those opinions so perfect that there was hardly any change. The only time the ink was on the paper was for Jamshedji Kanga to sign the opinion. Imagine he started practice in 1944. Within 6 years, because of his direct exposure to the taxation law, he wrote the magnus opus, the law and practice of income tax, and the name was given as Kanga and Palkhiwala. Mr. Kanga had, I think at the 4th or 5th edition inaugural, mentioned that his name was mentioned only because of the respect that he had to his seniors, and actually the work was done by Nani himself. By 1976, the particular edition had the particular book had run into 7 editions. Even today, law and practice by Kanga and Palkhiwala is considered to be the Bhagavad Gita of taxation law. Nani wrote several books, Taxation in India, published by Harvard University in the World Tax series. Then the highest tax nation was his another book, because of which the government had to reduce the ridiculously high taxation of 97.75 to a reasonable one. The other books which he wrote for common public is Constitution Defaced and Defiled, Judiciary Made to Measure, We the People, and We the Nation. These are all compilation of his various talks and thoughts which are compressed in this book, worth a read. Within 11 years of his practice, he had mastered not only the taxation law, but he had mastered the art of public speaking as well. Under the auspices of A.D. Shroff Memorial, and there was a lecture which was arranged in 1955 on budget. Now, mind you, Palkhiwala used to comment on the budget within 2 days of its being released in the parliament. So before that, he was appointed as a member of the Law Commission, and his first budget speech was at Green's Hotel, which is now replaced by Taj Intercontinental Building. After a few years, the space became too small. The crowd started growing, so it was shifted to Kawaji Jangir Hall, which is now the NGMA. Even that started becoming so crowded that it had to be shifted to East Lawns at the Cricket Club of India. Even though East Lawns were becoming too congested, and even ultimately it was shifted to the Brabant Stadium. Mind you, Brabant Stadium has a capacity of around 35,000 spectators when there is a cricket match is going on. But Nani Palkhiwala lecture attracted a crowd of more than 1 lakh, because most of the crowd was sitting on the ground, which does not happen in the case of a cricket match. And the stadiums were also full. So this is one of the picture of one of Nani's lectures at the Brabant Stadium, and I have not missed a single lecture. Nani's worth was immediately recognized by the government. Normally in the matters where the matters are in international fora, it is the advocate, it is the Attorney General who represents, but Nani was considered to be the best bet, and so he represented India in matters like in 1966-67 regarding the boundary dispute near Rann of Kutch with Pakistan. He appeared before the Indo-Pak Western Boundary Case Tribunal and succeeded in the matter. The next appearance in 1971 was when the Indian Airlines plane was hijacked. That case went into International Civil Aviation Organization at Montreal against Pakistan. Unfortunately, in that matter, he lost, and then the appeal was filed in the International Court of Justice. So this is how Palkhiwala had represented India in international fora. His other achievements, among many, is that he was elected honorary member of the Academy of Political Science in New York. Now, Palkhiwala was ultimately requested to join the government not as a minister but as an ambassador to the United States, and during the Bajpayee period he remained an ambassador from 1977 to 1979. This is the picture where Nani is presenting the credentials to Jimmy Carter, the President of the United States, at the White House. Jimmy Carter had already made a little research on Palkhiwala, and in a written speech, he had said that I know that you are a champion of human rights and democracy and the savior of fundamental rights. That was a big compliment received at the time of presentation of the credentials. He was in USA from 1977 to 79. During that period, he received a lot of honors. He addressed the United Nations General Assembly against apartheid policy of South Africa and asserted the principles of human dignity, equality, and freedom. In 1978, he was conferred the honorary degree of Doctor of Laws by the Princeton University, New Jersey. In 1979, he was again conferred honorary degree of Doctor of Laws by Lawrence University in Wisconsin. There were also domestic honors. He was honored the Person of the Year award by the Limca Book of Records for gathering of more than 1 lakh for a non-political rally. 1998, he was conferred with the degree of Doctor of Laws by the Bombay University. In 1998, rather late in the day, but however, he was conferred with Padma Vibhushan by the President of India. That's how the picture shows. And in 2000, he was conferred with the degree of Doctor of Law by Manipal Academy of Higher Education. Nani Palkhiwala believed in doing donation without any publicity. He donated 10% of his net income every year to Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan for causes which were nearest to his heart. He bequeathed his shares worth 51.61 lakhs and fixed deposit worth 2 crores to the Medical Research Foundation of Sankara Netralaya in Chennai. Nani received a paralytic stroke, unfortunately, in 1996. And although his brain was alert, he resigned from Tata Group, and in 1997 also resigned as the chairman of ACC. His wife Nargish passed away on 4th June 2000, and Nani was completely alone. Nani could not come out of the effect of the stroke, and ultimately breathed his last on 11th of December 2002. The government of India posthumously brought out a postage stamp and a first day cover in Nani's honor, and the same was released by the Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee on 16th of January 2004, 4 days before his birth anniversary. Nani appeared in about 1,500 major cases, including cases under taxation law, constitution law, company law, and so many other topics which can be put into a lecture of not 45 minutes. Now let us come to the important cases that he appeared. The first case that he appeared, and virtually appeared in absentia, is Golaknath's case in 1967. Before that, let us see what was the legal structure, or what was legally happening in India. In 1951, the first constitution amendment was brought in, whereby 9th schedule was inserted into the constitution, so that whichever legislation is put into the 9th schedule, and in those days there were certain agrarian land reforms which was a legislation which was put into 9th schedule, so that they were immune from judicial review. Now this particular 9th schedule ultimately became such a great obstacle, as we will come to. The first time this particular concept of 9th schedule was challenged in Sankari Prasad Dev versus Union of India in 1952. And in those days, the parliament was virtually the entire Constituent Assembly was the first parliament, and everybody expected that the Constituent Assembly, which had passed the constitution, would not do any harm by taking advantage of the 9th schedule. So Supreme Court held that the power to amend the constitution was without any limitation, and that means technically it meant that even the fundamental rights could be taken away. No such effort was made at that time. But the next case comes in is Sajjan Singh versus State of Rajasthan in 1965. In that case, Nani Palkhiwala name was suggested to appear for the petitioners, but Nani felt that this matter is going to take a very long time. He said, I will come at the fag end of the matter and I will argue the matter. He was warned that this matter was before the bench of Chief Justice Gajendra Gadkar, and the matter may suddenly come to an end and Nani may not get a chance to argue. And precisely the same thing happened. In Sajjan Singh, Supreme Court said that there was no question of reviewing the judgment in Sankari Prasad Dev, and no review was required. And that's how, by a very thin majority of 3 versus 2, it was held that the review was not required. Nani could not come at the last moment because the matter had abruptly ended. But I'm sure if Nani was to appear, it would have been a majority judgment, 3 versus 2, that the matter did require a review. Unfortunately, that did not happen. Now we come to Golaknath case. Now this Golaknath case, as I said, Nani appeared virtually in absentia because this was a man, this is a Golaknath had some lands which were declared surplus under Punjab Security and Land Tenure Act of 1955. The act provided that the tenants would become owners of the surplus land. The act was included in the 9th schedule by Constitution 7th Amendment of 1964, whereby it became immune to the attack on the ground of violation of under Article 14, 19 and 31. The matter being extremely important, as it was called for review of the Supreme Court judgment in Sajjan Singh's case, Chief Justice Koka Subba Rao constituted a bench of 11 judges of the Supreme Court. When the hearing started, Nani was already representing the case of Union of India before International Tribunal against Pakistan in Switzerland. Nani was requested to come to Supreme Court and appear. Now, Switzerland is not something where you can just come immediately. So Nani requested that he agreed to appear only for 1 day, and he flew from Switzerland and came to Delhi on Sunday. While coming from the airport to the hotel, he acquainted himself with what was happening in the matter from the advocates on record and agreed to appear on Monday. Senior advocate Nambiar who was already on the legs. When he saw Palkhiwala, he had a sigh of relief, and because since morning the Supreme Court was relentlessly putting certain questions which he was unable to answer. Nambiar said that the questions which were raised by the court were of such extreme importance, and since Mr. Palkhiwala is present here, I will take your lordship permission to allow Palkhiwala to answer them. Well, the court did allow Palkhiwala to answer. Nani attacked the arguments of the Attorney General, and in the course of the day convinced the bench that Sajjan Singh's case was required to be reviewed, and ultimately by a majority of 6 versus 5, the Supreme Court set aside the judgment in Sajjan Singh's case. If Nani was to appear right from the beginning, probably the ratio of paper-thin ratio of 6 versus 5 would have been something much larger. The consequence of the judgment was a setback for the parliament, in which Congress party led by Indira Gandhi had a majority. The battleground for 15 years, and Supreme Court was delivered a landmark judgment in bank nationalization case, P.V. Percy's case and Keshwananda Bharti case, which immediately followed. After this judgment in Golaknath case came the next was bank nationalization case. This was a case in 1970. It was actually R.C. Cooper versus Union of India, but famously known as bank nationalization case. Since the time of Pandit Nehru, it was believed that socialism was the best economic model for development of India, whereby the state could control the important industries. State Bank of India took over Imperial Bank of India in 1955, and the Reserve Bank of India regulated banking sector and reduced the number of commercial banks from 566 in 1951 to 89 in 1969. Finance Minister Morarji Desai felt that instead of paying rupees 85 crore as compensation for the extinguishment of the banks, government should control banks through a legislation. Morarji was dropped as the finance minister on 17 July 1969 by the Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, and he resigned on 18th of July 1969. On 19 July, which was a Saturday, the acting President of India promulgated a bank companies acquisition and transfer undertaking ordinance 1969 and nationalized 14 banks having deposits exceeding 50 crores. It was announced by Indira Gandhi in the afternoon broadcast of All India Radio. The move was criticized by Raj Gopalachari, ex-Governor General of India, and others, since the monsoon session of Parliament was to start after 2 days and there was no necessity of passing an ordinance. But the intention was to prevent Parliament with a fait accompli. Ordinance provided that the compensation shall be fixed by mutual consent. If it failed, then the matter will be referred to a tribunal. The compensation was to be paid not in cash, but by central government securities payable after 10 years. On 21st of June 1969, within 48 hours, Nani Palkhiwala moved the petition filed by R.C. Cooper, who was a shareholder in one of the banks. Nani flew into Delhi on 20th June 1969 and dictated the petition in 2 hours. On 22nd June 1969, application was moved for interim relief, and the chairman of the nationalized banks were prevented from being removed by the government as per interim relief. The question raised were whether a shareholder of a bank could file a petition under ordinance, whether the ordinance was validly promulgated, and whether fundamental right under Article 19(1)(f) and 31(2) to acquire, hold, and dispose of the property was violated. Nani argued the matter that R.C. Cooper's right to receive dividend and erosion of the value of his investment amounted to violation of his fundamental right. Supreme Court held that Cooper could maintain the petition and it is not necessary for the bank to challenge the act. It further held that satisfaction of the President while issuing the ordinance could be reviewed by the Supreme Court. Nani argued that banking business can be acquired, but not the trading and other activities carried on by the bank, as those were the activities which fell within the jurisdiction of the state list and not in the central or concurrent list. By the time the matter was heard, the ordinance was replaced by an act. By a majority of 10 versus 1, Supreme Court struck down the act on the ground that although government could nationalize the banking business, Parliament could not prohibit the said banks from carrying out the businesses, and held that the method of ascertaining value of the assets and compensation by the tribunal was illusory. After the judgment was delivered on 10th of February 1970, on 14th February 1970, government promulgated first ordinance addressing the concerns of the Supreme Court, and on 27th of February, bill replaced the ordinance and was passed by both the houses at the end of 1970. A huge amount of compensation of 87.40 crores had to be paid. So that was a success for the petitioners. Now the next case, which was the the Privy Purses case. It was actually, the title of the case was Madhavrao Scindia and others versus Union of India, but famously known as Privy Purses case. Constitution 24th Amendment Bill of 1970 was introduced in Lok Sabha on 2nd September 1970, abolishing privy purses granted to the erstwhile princes of the native states. Since the Congress party has a majority, had the numbers to pass the bill, it passed the bill by 332 versus 154 votes, which was more than 2/3 majority of the members present and voting. On 5th September 1970, the bill was introduced in Rajya Sabha. It failed to get 2/3 majority by a single vote, as the votes which were given were 149 versus 75, which was not the 2/3 majority. The same evening, in an emergency cabinet meeting, the government got presidential proclamation issued re-recognizing princes and abolishing their privy purses. President V.V. Giri, who was on an official visit in Hyderabad, passed the order at night in Hyderabad, and the order that was issued to Maharaja of Gwalior read as follows. In exercise of the powers vested in the President under Article 366 subclause 22 of the Constitution, the President directs that with effect from the date of the order, His Highness Maharajadhiraj Madhavrao Jivaji Rao Scindia Bahadur does cease to be recognized as a ruler of Gwalior. Similar orders were passed as regards the other rulers, and payment of privy purses was discontinued. The princes requested Nani to take up the case, and on 14th of September 1973, the Supreme Court admitted the writ petition challenging the validity of the presidential order. Hearing commenced before a constitution bench of 11 judges presided over by Justice Hidayatullah on 14th October 1970. Nani's argument was that on perusal of white paper on Indian states, its instruments of accession, merger agreements, and the covenants, obligation under international law and provisions of the Constitution, the order of President de-recognizing the rulers was unconstitutional, as the government could not do indirectly by presidential proclamation what it failed to directly do on the floor of the House. Article 291 observes payment of privy purses was a charge on the Consolidated Fund of India, and this provision cannot be debated or voted in the Parliament. On 15th December 1970, the Supreme Court struck down the presidential order by a majority of 9 versus 2 judges. Indira Gandhi was outraged by the setback in the Supreme Court in bank nationalization case as in Privy Purses case. In 1971 election, she secured massive mandate of 352 out of 518 seats that enabled her to abolish the Privy Purses by a Constitution 26th Amendment Act of 1971. Now, after all this that had happened, the case was now ripe for the next biggest challenge in the Supreme Court in the form of Keshavananda Bharati case. His Holiness Keshavananda Bharati Sripad Galvaru was the head of Matha property in Kerala. Kerala government had passed Kerala Land Reform Act in 1963 and Kerala Land Reform Amendment Act in 1969, whereby the activities of the Math as well as the rights of the tenants of the property were adversely affected. In order to repel the challenge of this to the said acts, the Parliament by Constitution Amendment 29th Amendment Act of 1972 had put the said acts in the 9th schedule of the Constitution, whereby they were immunized from challenge as being violation of fundamental right. On 21st March 1970, Keshavananda Bharati directly filed a writ petition under Article 32 before the Supreme Court, challenging certain provisions of the said act. There were also other petitioners who filed the petition along with the said petition in respect of persons from the industries like mining, coal and sugar companies, and also some of the erstwhile rulers of the native states in respect of certain legislations which were also affected by the said action. There were about 20 interveners in the matter. At the instance of these companies, a team of lawyers was formed to represent the petitioners, consisting of Mr. Palkiwala as the lead counsel, duly assisted by Mr. Soli Sorabji, Anil Diwan, D.M. Popat, M.L. Bhakta, Ravindra Narayan, and J.B. Dadachanji. Some other petitioners were represented by C.K. Daftari, M.C. Chagla, and other seniors. Incidentally, Keshavananda Bharati and Palkiwala had never met each other, never spoke to each other. The matter was, he represented Keshavananda Bharati because the other petitioners had briefed him simultaneously. State of Kerala was represented by none other than the constitutional expert Mr. H.M. Sirvai with T.R. Andarujina as his junior. Union of India was represented by Attorney General Nirande, Solicitor General Lal Narayan Sinha, and Advocates Generals of various states also appeared in the matter, to whom notices were given. The petitioner's side was a packed team of competent lawyers. Respondent side was a completely depleted side, because ordinarily whenever there is a challenge to the virus of the constitution or the law, it is the union government is represented by the Attorney General of India. But Mr. Sirvai had accepted the brief on the specific understanding that he will be the one who will start the arguments on behalf of the respondent. Mr. Nirande did not like the idea. He went to Indira Gandhi and told her that it was his right to address. Indira Gandhi said that let Mr. Sirvai argue. So he had to gulp that insult, and he had to, but there was no communication or any assistance between given by the Attorney General to Mr. Sirvai. The matter took 68 working days. It started on 31st of October 1972 and lasted till 23rd of March 1973. Every week Supreme Court heard the matter from Tuesday to Thursday, and on Monday and Friday they did the normal work of hearing special leave petitions. Palkiwala argued the matter for 31 days, Sirvai argued for 21 days, advocates for Union of India together argued for 12 days, and the other petitioners and respondents argued for the balance days. The points which were broadly discussed were as follows. What is the width and extent of amending power of Parliament under Article 368? Whether the word amendment in Article 368 can be widely construed to result in destroying or altering the essential features, the basic elements, and fundamental principles of the Constitution. Whether the word law in Article 13 includes constitutional amendment as well. Can Article 13 and 368 themselves be amended as proposed in the Constitution Amendment 24th Amendment Act of 1971? Whether the word amount in Article 31(2) reflects reasonable compensation or was illusory and arbitrary as was proposed in the Constitution 25th Amendment Act of 1971. And whether Article 31(c) sought to be inducted in the Constitution would destroy or damage the core of several essential features of the Constitution by making fundamental rights subservient or subordinate to the directive principles of the state policy. Supreme Court delivered a judgment of 703 pages. The decision was delivered on 24th April 1973. As on 25th April, the Chief Justice was to resign. to retire. The decision consists of 11 separate judgments delivered. 6 judges held that Parliament's power to amend the Constitution was limited and they could not alter the basic structure of the Constitution. 6 judges thought otherwise and took a diametrically opposite view and held that there was no such limitation on the amending power of the Parliament. Justice Khanna, who authored a separate judgment and gave his own reasons, but ultimately tilted the balance in favor of the majority, that is in favor of democracy and rule of law. The final decision, 7 versus 6, was as follows. 24th Constitution Amendment Act, which overruled Golaknath case, was upheld, whereby the Parliament had the power to amend any part of the Constitution except altering the basic structure. The word amount was replaced by the word compensation in Article 31 as proposed by 25th Amendment Act. The first part of Article 31C as proposed in the 25th Amendment Act was upheld and the latter part was struck down. The 29th Amendment Act was also upheld as regards insertion of 2 land reform laws of Kerala in the 9th schedule. Outwardly, it appears that a lot of points were held in favor, but the main point of unalterable part of the Constitution on the basis of basic structure came in the way. After the disposal of the petition on 24th April, the Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was most upset. And although the Supreme Court had reversed the decision in Golaknath case, due to the concept of basic structure introduced, the power of Parliament to amend the Constitution was restricted. In the meantime, so many other things happened. Indira Gandhi lost her election petition against Raj Narayan in the Allahabad High Court in June 1975 and was disqualified for 6 years. She appealed to the Supreme Court and Nani appeared for her before the vacation judge and she got a conditional stay. Vacation Judge Krishna Iyer got a conditional stay of the judgment whereby she could sit in the Parliament but could not vote. The opposition party started demanding her resignation, and in reply to the agitations which took place all over India, she declared national emergency on 25th June 1975. By then, Chief Justice Sikri, who was the Chief Justice at the time of majority judgment in Kesavananda Bharti case, had retired. 3 senior judges, Shalat, Hegde and Grover, who had also sided with the majority, were superseded, and Justice A.N. Ray was appointed as Chief Justice of India. This supersession resulted in all the 3 judges tendering their resignation, which gave the scope to the government for appointed what is called the committed judges. This frame was framed by one of the advisors of Indira Gandhi, Mr. Kumar Mangalam. With the composition of new Supreme Court, with new judges appointed, Indira Gandhi was advised by her competent advisors, Mr. Gokhale, Mr. Siddharth Shankar Ray, and Mr. Kumar Mangalam, that it was appropriate time to challenge the Kesavananda Bharti judgment by asking for a review. In the meantime, Indira Gandhi did succeed in her appeal, but Supreme Court struck down 39 Constitution amendment, which prevented the Prime Minister's election being challenged in the court of law. She had put up that particular thing that a Prime Minister election cannot be challenged, that was struck down. On 10th of November 1975, a bench of 13 judges assembled to hear the review plea of the government. By that time, only 5 judges who were part of the earlier judgment in Kesavananda Bharti case were part of this review matter. After opening arguments by Attorney General Niran De, who said that because of this basic structure theory, which was never there in the Constitution, there are so many laws which are pro-citizen laws, we could not be passed because of this particular thing. Nani, in his reply, submitted 22 preliminary objections and for considering the review. And the main preliminary objection that was that can a review lie without actual filing of a review petition? Chief Justice Ray pointed out that there were so many governments which wanted review petition and pointed a finger at Mr. Govind Swaminathan, the Advocate General of Tamil Nadu. Mr. Swaminathan got up from his seat and embarrassed the Chief Justice and other committed judges on the bench by stating the state of Tamil Nadu had filed no such application for review. Nani argued the matter on 10th and 11th of November in Supreme Court. Eventually, the judges were so embarrassed that the Chief Justice found himself into an acute majority of 12 versus 1. On 12th November 1975, while Nani was still on his legs, the Chief Justice announced that this bench was dissolved. Mr. Justice H.R. Khanna, who was there in the Keshwananda Bharati original case and also in the review, in his memoirs, stated that never before in the history of the court has there been a performance like this. It was not Nani who spoke, but it was divinity speaking through him. Mr. Khanna also inquired with some of the brother judges on the bench, and they too also felt that such arguments will not be heard in a court for centuries to come, and the forensic feat that will perhaps be never equaled, and that the advocacy and eloquence was of such high quality that it was unparalleled in the entire history of the world. Justice Khanna too had to pay a heavy price for his minority judgment in ADM Jabalpur versus Shukla by being superseded by Justice Beg. These are some of the Nani's achievements pre and post emergency that that will remain etched in the judicial memory. Lord Denning, Master of Rolls, had gestured that if 10 lawyers of the world were to be selected, Nani will certainly find a place in such august company. It is difficult to compress Nani's achievements in such a short time, but if we as citizens still enjoy the basic freedoms, and most of the credit for that must go to Mr. Nani Palkhiwala. I am too small a person, and therefore I have to request the audience to carry my wishes to the authorities that may be. In this Nani birth centenary, he should be nominated and awarded Bharat Ratna. Secondly, somebody should take up the lead in making a biopic on Nani's life, or at least on his judicial career. I'm sure there are so many corporate houses, there are so many people with the finance who can support this project, and if this is done, it will remain as a lifetime memory of Nani Palkhiwala. I must say that the people who were in practice before 1996, and the people who did not hear Nani Palkhiwala in his budget speeches have missed something in life. I remember the full court reference in the Bombay High Court when Mr. Iqbal Chagla, then the president of the Bombay Bar Association, mentioned that here we have gathered not to mourn the death of Palkhiwala, but to tell ourselves that we are so lucky that in our times there was a person like Nani Palkhiwala who had the courage of taking on the government and upholding the democracy, upholding the principles of the Constitution. Thank you.